two players you can draft. Player 1 is the best at his position. Player 2 is the third best at his position. Which player do you choose? Even if you barely watch the NFL, you know that there is nuance to this question. You need to know their position. I mean, if player 1 was a kicker, what are we even talking about? But what if player 1 was a running back? What if he was Jeremiah Love?
Jeremiah Love with a hurdle.
Let's assume player 2 is a wide receiver, Makai Lemon. Now who do you choose? You see, teams don't pick the best player. That is not at all how this works. And the clearest example of that is the most coveted position for the majority of NFL lore, the running back. Sure, running backs are valuable, but backs break, and they're pretty tough to untangle from their offensive line. But this guy is really, really good. I mean, he's so good that the consensus mocks have him as a top 5 pick, which begs the question, how could any team be that dumb?
Reliable.
Bitch, man. I said Hennessy. We need more Hennessy. Come on, dog. Come on, dog.
I mean, you're obviously saying bitch made.
Hennessy.
Stop.
I mean, maybe a more polite way to phrase that question. How good does a running back need to be in order to be worth it, at least for that pick? That opens up the real issue and challenge here. How do you know if the risk is worth the reward? In order to evaluate if a player is worth drafting, we need to understand a few things. First, I am not Mel Kiper.
Salutations, good sir.
I am not here to tell you how good I think Jeremiah Love will be. The second thing you need to know is the game of football. And in the game of football, there are certain positions that are more impactful than others. Now, we have a pretty good idea which players are good at these positions because of scouting and analytics. That's all you need to know about the game of football. Third, the NFL draft. Players drafted in the NFL have slotted contracts. That is, their pay is predetermined. It does not matter if you're a quarterback or kicker. If you get picked 10th, you get the same amount of money. When Dave Gettleman said that they will take the best player available, he was not kidding. The Giants selected Saquon Barkley with the number 2 overall pick. But if you recall, some positions in football are more impactful than others. Quarterback happens to be one of those positions. Dave did not select Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson.
Every boy gone.
Dave.
R.I.P. Dave. The last piece we need to understand is free agency. Alec Pierce is a good receiver, somewhere around 25th to 30th in the league, depending on who you ask. He's 28th on Madden, which is probably more accurate than asking your buddy or a Colts fan. Alec Pierce will make more money than any running back in the NFL this year, including Dave Gettleman's goose, Saquon, who now plays for a division rival and has won a Super Bowl. Alec? He'll make a lot more than him. Free agency and contract extensions tell you how much the league thinks certain positions are worth, and this is where you absolutely cannot listen to head coaches.
Defense wins championships.
He's bluffing. The market has decided that offense is more important than defense, and that the passing game is more important than the run game. The top paid players are quarterbacks. The second highest paid players are the ones who play catch with quarterbacks. The third highest paid players try to kill the quarterbacks, softly. And the fourth highest paid players try to protect the quarterbacks from those who try to kill the quarterbacks. Players are not paid based on how good they are. They're paid based on what position they're good at. This makes hitting on a premium position significantly more valuable than hitting on a non-premium position. That does not mean the team should not pick non-premium players.
Huh?
Teams need to know what they're buying. To understand this challenge, we need to play a game. Welcome to the Gridiron Gamble. Like the NFL, you have a budget. The salary cap conveniently sits at $300 million this year. Please welcome our 2 players.
Another round, honey. Hit 'em.
Any game involves risk and reward, and from an investment perspective, you cannot avoid risk. Even the risk-free rate is not free from risk, and in football, there is a risk to a draft pick panning out.
Woo. Go ahead and put a first rounder on black.
You realize those aren't even 50% odds, right?
Oh shit, boy. Spin them.
Let's continue with our Jeremiah Love example. Jeremiah Love is a risk. There's a lot of risks. There's a chance that he gets hurt. There's a chance that his offensive line sucks, which means he's probably not going to cook. But remember, there is a risk to everything. Even Fernando Mendoza at number 1, there's a good chance that he does not become a successful starting quarterback. Thus, the need to identify hit rates. This is the first step in our analysis. How likely is it that a player pans out?
Come on! Come on!
There are several ways to measure this, but perhaps the best measure,
Come on!
whether or not the player is playing. This is the hit rate by round from the 2009 to 2022 draft. The first thing you will notice is that the hit rate declines as we move right, which is expected because better players are at the beginning of the draft. Better players are more likely to play. In order to be classified as a hit, a player needs to play at least 75% of the snaps relative to their position. For example, running backs rotate, which is taken into context and adjusted for. To summarize, if a player is on the field like a typical starter, this is a signal that they are valuable and they possess the best ability, availability. Here is what that looks like by position. Tight end has the highest hit rate for the first round, followed by interior offensive linemen and safeties. Part of this has to do with the fact that there are far more premium positions. Since 2009, only 7 running backs have been taken in the top 10, while 22 edge rushers have. The reason is simple. Teams are more willing to take a risk on an edge rusher because of the potential value of hitting on one is worth more than the potential value of hitting on a running back. Chase Young is a great example here. Given that he was chosen number 2 overall, his career feels a bit underwhelming, but his second contract was still more than any running back in the NFL at the time. It feels disrespectful to compare him to, say, Saquon, but the market views them as essentially identical in value. This gets into the second critical part of our examination, surplus value. Quarterback is well known as the highest paid and most important position. It's also the most difficult to find on the open market, at least good ones. In the last 25 years, only 5 Super Bowls have been won by free agent QBs. It is very expensive to replace QBs because of the cost and thin market for quality starters. Here's what the replacement cost looks like for a starter on the open market. A replacement starter is directly correlated with our hit rate graph. The positions with the lowest hit rates are the hardest to replace, and the positions with the highest hit rates are the easiest to replace. There are positional differences, and these are directly correlated with free agency availability. Jacksonville did not let Trevor Lawrence become a free agent. Trevor Lawrence has never won a playoff game. According to my quarterback rankings, he is a...
Okay.
And the Jaguars gave him a $275 million contract. The market for premium positions isn't just thin, it is borderline non-existent. If you can find a D tackle or wide receiver on the open market, you will pay a premium, and he almost certainly won't be great. I mean, the top 2 this year are guys that failed to crack any fantasy lineups, Wan'Dale and Romeo Doubs. On the other hand, it's very easy to find centers, tight ends, safeties, and running backs in free agency. For more information on the methodology, you can click the link down in the description. Nick Gurol did a great job putting together a few articles and helping pull all this data together. So quick shout out and thank you to Nick. Understanding replacement value helps us understand the alternatives to drafting a player. Since the running back market is fairly inexpensive, that means the pressure is on Love.
Reliable.
Or at least any team that's willing to use precious draft capital to draft Love.
Cameron Ward, quarterback.
Now we are at the heart of the issue. We need to determine if the risk is worth the reward. For example, how do we tell if Jeremiah Love is worth it at 3? With hit rates, surplus value, and replacement costs, we have all the tools needed to build a risk-return ratio. And I will pull at my investment roots here. This is the Sharpe ratio for football players. If you don't know what the Sharpe ratio is, it's fairly simple. How much return do you get for each unit of risk that you take on? It's risk relative to return. If you know what the Sharpe ratio is, you might have read a few Nassim Taleb chapters and you feel inclined to immediately call out its deficiencies. We'll walk through that in a bit. But keep in mind, there is a reason this is such a popular metric in finance. It's useful, and it's useful here. Let's look at the first position to better understand this. Tight end. The Sharpe ratio for tight end is negative in the first round, and here's what that means. On average, the biggest risk relative to the return is picking a tight end. It's easiest to understand this when we look at fantasy football's biggest punching bag, Kyle Pitts. He hasn't failed completely, he's still in the league, but he isn't relatively worth a lot. He's on a one-year deal for $15 million. Meanwhile, the 10 picks that came after him are getting paid. At the time, this was supposedly a safe pick. Well, that definition has been stretched by Pitts, but it also highlights a ridiculous miscalculation by the Falcons. Even if he had developed into the best tight end in the league, say Trey McBride, he would not have been as valuable as the 10 players taken after him. The Falcons could have taken anyone and paid just as much. They could have got Jamar Chase or Micah Parsons. Instead, they got Pitts. Sure, you will hit a lot, but at what opportunity cost? It's no coincidence that Brock Bowers, arguably a better tight end prospect than Pitts, went at 13 last year. Tight ends just aren't as valuable. The Sharpe is negative throughout the draft, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but at the very least, this is a sign that you should think long and hard about taking a tight end in the first round. Quick shout out to today's sponsor, Raycon. Okay, with Mother's Day coming up, you probably need a gift, and ideally it's one that your mom would use every day. That's where Raycon's bone conduction headphones are awesome. They're off your audio, which means they send vibrations through your bones. I love wearing my Raycons because it's nice to hear the world when you work out.
You can actually adjust them to put them over your ears. You want to have just a little bit different sound experience, but I like keeping them not over the ears so I can just hear everything else. It's pretty crazy too. It's like magic. You can hear everything.
13 hours of battery life, IP68 waterproof and dustproof, and here's the kicker. Raycon gives you premium performance without the price tag. These things are half the cost of other premium headphones. Plus right now, I gotta hook it up for you. You can get them for 15% off. So if you're looking for a gift for mom, this is an awesome option. Celebrate the moms in your life. Go to buyraycon.com/McKelveyBC to get 15% off bone conduction headphones. Thanks Raycon for sponsoring. Next three positions are all non-premium positions: safety, inside linebacker, and interior offensive line, so center and guards. A similar theme to tight end, these positions are deeply negative in the beginning of the draft, the biggest factor being the relatively cheap replacement cost. Recall that similar to tight end, all of these positions had high hit rates in the first round, and if we go back through the coach speak and scouting reports, they all carried the most worshipped adjective in scouting.
Safe. We need to play it safe. We need to bulk up the interior offensive.
Bitch made boy, aren't you?
I mean, you're just obviously saying it again. You're saying bitch made again. I'm not a bitch.
Bitch made boy.
You're saying it again. You're saying bitch made.
I can pretty much promise you that every organization that picked a non-premium guy in the first round viewed them as safe. I mean, it isn't news to these front offices that some positions are more affordable than others. This came down to some combination of need and safe.
I should call her.
No organization will ever use the first word because need sounds desperate. Just as you won't get your ex-girlfriend back by saying you need her, the New York Jets wouldn't have won any fans back by saying they needed Calvin Pryor.
Cecilia was everything. Cece was it all.
CC was the queso dip, brother.
What does that even mean?
Passed around.
Teams find themselves in a needy situation because of bad fortune, but the more likely scenario is poor judgment.
But like, how specifically do you know that?
Just play cards. Just play cards.
Calvin Pryor was not safe, and I don't mean because quite literally he was a safety hazard and somewhat violent, fought his teammate before practice. I mean, he was not a sure bet. There's a risk to everything. The Jets could have got a lot more valuable players. Our next position is running back. So back to our Jeremiah Love question. Drafting a running back in the first round has been pretty horrible. The running back position is deeply negative in the first round, meaning the risk is nowhere worth the return. Based on our data for player return, Jeremiah Love needs to be as good as Christian McCaffrey or better. That means he not only needs to have the kind of production that McCaffrey had, but he also needs to be as healthy as McCaffrey was. In his first 4 seasons, he was the starter 51 of 64 games. Doesn't seem like a tall task, but for someone getting the ball 1,000 times and putting up this kind of production, that is a very high bar. McCaffrey was a 2-time All-Pro and widely considered the best running back in the league for a stretch of his rookie contract. If drafted at 3, Love needs to be that good. Now, maybe you disagree with all this. You think running backs are worth more. Let's see if the next position makes this more clear.
The man who dance out wide.
A position that's probably pissed you off more than any lately. I mean, first we had to deal with the quarterbacks getting their bag, and they don't even get hit anymore. Now we got the divas getting their bag.
It's a Birkin.
Seems Birkin.
Here's our sharp curve for receivers, which is positive in the first round. This is largely due to a few factors. The hit rate is lower for receivers, but the surplus value based on what they cost is significant. Puka was only paid about $1 million this year when he was worth about 40. Rashid Shaheed is a good receiver, but he was technically Seattle's third best receiver this year. We will upgrade him to wide receiver 2 based on his special teams abilities. He just signed for $17 million a year. The hit rate on lower receivers, but only 2 running backs will make more than him this year, McCaffrey and Barkley. The cost of receivers these past few years has skyrocketed.
Again, maybe you disagree with all this. In fact, you probably do. You've probably played fantasy football and noticed an endless supply of receivers on your bench, and running back is pretty thin. Yeah, it's difficult to untangle a running back from the offensive line, but there are real dudes there. Dudes that make a difference.
Well, the best top 10 running back in the data set was Todd Gurley, who was picked at number 10. 2 first-team All-Pro years helped him earn a big second contract. Gurley was the best return for the risk in terms of his rookie value. However, Gurley barely matches the median second-round contract for a wide receiver according to our Sharpe value. Again, the reason here is simple. Wide receivers have been getting paid. Sure, second-rounders have a low hit rate here, which feels risky.
Hit me!
But when they become a wide receiver 2 or above, they're getting paid more than elite running backs. Even wide receiver 3s and 4s are making more than most starting backs. Tutu Atwell had 6 catches last year. 6. And he will be getting paid like a top 10 running back.
These are the facts, and this is the market. Now, that does not mean that the market is accurate. In fact, it most certainly is not.
As is the case with pretty much every market, you can't change it by yourself. For example, I think the Seattle housing market is overpriced, but the market doesn't really care what I think.
People need houses to live in, and teams need wide receivers. Now, if you think that receivers are overvalued, here's the counterintuitive part. I would not suggest to avoid them. I would suggest drafting more of them.
If we go back to our Sharpe curves, notice how the peaks are in the late first, second, or even has a positive value in the third round. Remember, the cheapest labor and greatest opportunity is the draft. So if you believe that wide receivers are being overpriced by the market, draft more of them. When they come due for extensions, trade them. Waddle and Metcalf both commanded fairly large draft capital. Now, to be clear here, I am not advising against all wide receiver extensions.
Each situation is different, but the larger point here is, if you believe the market is overvalued for receivers, don't run away from the game. Play the game more.
The hit rate for wide receivers is on the lower side for late first, second, and third rounders, but the Sharpe ratio is still positive in each of these first 3 rounds.
If you feel like the housing market is overpriced, well, you still need a house. But that doesn't mean you have to listen to your friends and family. Rent.
As we move up our Sharpe curve, we see the rest of our premium positions land. The big boys come in next. Starting offensive tackles are incredibly expensive and difficult to find in free agency.
In comparison to offensive tackles, edge rushers have a higher bust rate.
They have a high Sharpe ratio throughout the first 2 days of the draft. Still, edge rushers have come in higher than them in terms of top 10 return and the first round return. The reason is simple. They command seismic second contracts. The top edge rushers are paid more than any other position not named quarterback. Which brings up one of the biggest misunderstandings in football.
Perhaps the most documented reoccurring draft blunder, that of trading up for the quarterback.
It is the Titanic to the iceberg, the Icarus to the sun. There are so many bad first-round quarterbacks that you actually kind of forget how many bad first-round quarterbacks there are. But the hit rate since 2009 is actually better than several positions. Many people would argue that this is because first-round QBs are always given the keys, and that is an accurate observation. But I think a lot of the criticism also has to do with the spotlight on the position. The fact that only one guy plays in the game, and it can kind of either go bad or good. Chase Young hasn't faced anywhere near the criticism Trubinsky had, but both are technically the second best player on their team for their position for the majority of their careers. Nevertheless, the real benefit to quarterbacks is their incomparable second contract. QBs lead all positions in top 10 Sharpe at .37. The drop-off here when looking at the Sharpe value is steep, so expecting a quality QB from later rounds
It's pretty dumb.
Now, something you may have noticed here, every position has a negative Sharpe ratio after about the third round. This does not mean that late round picks don't have value. Going back to our fifth rounder as an example, they might rarely become a legitimate starter, but at the very least, they provide incredibly cheap labor for depth and special teams. In other words, given the salary cap constraints, mid to late rounders help round out a team. There are only so many players you can afford. Teams can't just go sign an unlimited amount of starting caliber free agents. So late rounders are still important even if there's better bang for your buck replacement starters. Furthermore, non-premium positions tend to have a higher relative Sharpe ratio in the mid to late rounds. For example, taking a shot at a QB in round 5, 6, or 7 is probably a worse idea than drafting a safety. Another way of thinking of this, while Puka Nacua may be an unbelievable fifth-round hit, it is so rare that you will get a Puka that late in the draft that you're probably better off taking a non-premium position. Again, I am talking about averages here. This is not accounting for the nuance of a draft class to the next draft class, which, as we've determined, is quite different year to year. Teams are aware of risk-adjusted return. That is, they are aware of what the Sharpe ratio is measuring here. As I mentioned, though, that does not mean that they are behaving optimally. This might piss some people off, but yes, teams should probably be taking more shots at QBs in the first round. You might feel like they're getting overpaid, but given how much they are commanding in free agency, more teams should probably be taking a shot in the first round. This is not the most out-of-whack position, though. The case is even more clear for tackles. Based on Nick's modeling here, tackles should be taken about 2 to 3 times more often in the first round than they are. Edge rushers about twice as much. So what's a position that's probably being taken too frequently in the first round? Cornerback, wide receiver, interior offensive line, linebacker, safety, running back, and tight end. Again, these are averages based on what's happened. This is not our opinion.
Drafting players is non-intuitive. The best example of that is, well, you typically don't want to take the best player available. That's where something like the Sharpe ratio can be helpful. It is a guide that tells you what return you need to get in order to justify the risk. However, no investment decision should ever be made on the basis of one measurement. And, well, the biggest pitfall of the Sharpe is it is prospect agnostic.
The Sharpe ratio has no idea how good Jeremiah Love is or any 2026 prospect. It knows the historical prospects and how they've fared, but not this upcoming specific class.
So begins the second part of our analysis. How do we account for the different draft years, the difference in talent?
Draft classes are not interchangeable, and we see this when we look at the next-gen stats prospect scores, which combines a prospect's athleticism, production, and size. NGS uses 4 tiers: below average, which is 50 to 60, average, which is 60 to 70, good, 70 to 90, and elite, which is 90 or better. Instead of looking at mean scores, which compresses this into a narrow band, we count how many prospects in each class grade as good or better. A class with 5 good plus prospects is fundamentally different from 1 or 2, even if their averages are similar. Well, this year's draft class is incredibly thin. But by looking at this, we can see the variance year to year. Some classes have a lot of prospects, like last year. This year's class is not a lot.
Like you probably are, I was curious how accurate this was.
The correlation for running backs that are good or elite is 0.42. That is, they became 4-year starters about half the time. But the mismatches here are revealing. The 2021 class was said to be thin, and well, it ended up being pretty good. Several quality starters. We aren't talking about production, since this is heavily influenced by the offensive line. We are simply looking at hit rates being a starting running back. Mapping this current running back class out further, we see just how thin it is. Only 8 players grade out as good or better, and only one of them is elite. Jeremiah Love. After him, there is a steep drop-off in talent.
No other position group in this year's draft has that steep of a drop-off.
Now, if we look at this historically for running backs, Love is 5th. This puts him in the company of Jonathan Taylor, Saquon, Breece Hall, Bijan, Najee Harris, Genty, Etienne, and Derrick Henry. Not a bad crew. Keep in mind, these were the only players that were given this grade before the draft. This is important because it's stating that we have a pretty good idea what elite running backs look like before they ever play in the NFL. And I actually highlighted this in a video about college football recruiting a while back. 5-star running backs were the most likely position to become NFL players.
This means that Jeremiah Love is about as sure of a bet as any player in this draft class. However, there's still that one big problem.
Backs aren't worth a lot. So, is Love worth it at 3? First, let's map out the historical first-round surplus value on drafting a premium player. This is the average surplus value for a premium player. That'd be QBs, edge rushers, wide receivers, and offensive tackles. Sometimes they hit big, like Josh Allen. Sometimes they don't even get a second contract. Sorry, Johnny. Again, this is the average for premium players. This means that on average, the 3rd overall pick has a player return of $107 million. Player return is salary savings combined with playing time and the second contract value. For more information on what player return is, again, link down in the description. And understanding that, we can make some adjustments here. Here's the 2026 line based on our NGS scores for all positions. We're lowering it slightly. Next, the orange line here is the average non-premium position in terms of surplus value. So again, interior offensive linemen, tight end, running backs, linebackers, and safeties. This would be why the Sharpe hates non-premium players in the first round. There is a massive gap in surplus value throughout the first round. And when we look at our non-premium players, sure, there's still surplus value, but it's not that much in comparison to replacement contracts, i.e. free agents. Now again, Sharpe alone is limited, and as we just discussed, projecting Love to be a median player doesn't make much sense at running back since they tend to be more predictable than other positions. If we put Love at the 90th percentile, the elite category we discussed, his break-even point for this draft is pick 14. That'd be a whole 11 picks lower than his current expectation. Keep in mind, we don't know if he's going to be elite. This is if he is elite status, 90th percentile of players or better taken at number 14. He needs to be an elite mid-first rounder to justify taking over any other premium position.
So let's return to one of our questions from earlier. How could a team be this dumb?
Like any of the other mid-first rounders, Mekhi Lemon, offensive tackles Monroe Freeling, and Spencer Fano. Even if we adjust this draft and assume Jeremiah Love is elite, he does not sniff a top 5 pick, and only in elite scenarios does he even make it to pick 14. A few reasons. First, there's something unique to running backs. They peak early. Love's best years are likely his first 4 years, quite different than a quarterback or really any other position. In fact, his best year should be his first year. Based on average, a team should expect immediate results. Running backs deserve a bump in value on their rookie contract because of this.
Now, it seems likely that some team will take a shot at Love before pick 14. In fact, it seems almost guaranteed, which got me thinking. How have those teams done historically? Teams that have drafted non-premium players in the first round.
While the Sharpe ratio and surplus value are helpful, the ultimate question is, does this win? Let's stress test this. This is a graph that looks at the rookie deal surplus generated by quarterbacks, tackles, edge rushers, and wide receivers, those premium positions. On the left here are teams that generated the least amount of surplus value. Notice how when we move right, teams win more. That is, teams that generated more surplus value won significantly more and made the playoffs quite a bit more often, 39% versus 50%. This difference cannot be found if we were to look at non-premium players. That is, teams that generated a lot of surplus value from non-premium players weren't significantly more likely to make the playoffs or win more. In a game of inches, this is an edge. Just draft smartly.
All of those teams probably thought they were playing it safe, but more often than not, they were not. And sure, you might say that a lot of this has to do with unforeseen team need, but operating from a need-based mentality in the first or really any round, that is not safe. That is dangerous, which is the bigger point here. Taking big cuts is not reckless.
How's that, huh? How's that?
You might strike out more, but if the goal is to score the most runs, well, that might be the best strategy. At the same time, saying that no running back should ever be taken in the first round, that oversimplifies reality. Clearly, there are classes that are thin up top at the premium position, and well, sometimes there are prospects that are too unique to ignore. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and take care.